All right, this one's going to be a good one, folks. Welcome to the Leaders Who Care series, Doug. I know you're going to show everybody why you're on a Leaders Who Care series, right?
I guess so. We're going to try our best anyway.
Well, welcome. And best way to start, and I got to be more clear with men, usually more than anybody, is introduce yourself, like where you're from originally, who you are, where you're from originally, where you are now, family, maybe something that you've never told anybody you want to reveal to the world now. That's always interesting. We'll get to what you do after, but tell us about Doug.
Yeah, so I'm born and raised, born in Philadelphia, actually. That's where my parents' roots. We grew up outside of the Reading, Pennsylvania area, for those that know that, and was in a sports family. My father was a world-class runner, and I wound up playing all the sports, and my brothers played all the sports, and played basketball. I was just talking with you pregame, pre-show. Played basketball my freshman year, but actually gave that up to run track full time after my freshman year. I won a small college national championship, and that kind of propelled me into running and getting a full scholarship at the University of Georgia later on. Seven kids, and just
So you have
amazing.
seven kids, or
I
you?
do. I have seven kids, one woman for that, and so that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And anyway, so yeah, so I got five grandkids, and I'm a basic guy, who just wants to do good in this world.
Hmm.
Been entrepreneurial, and I've kind of had a couple successes, had some things that were struggles, so you hit the brick wall and you get around it. Um, and met a man 25 years ago that's now my business partner, has one of the most incredible stories, and it's a big impact of what we do today.
No, that's awesome. We'll come to that in a second, but you talked about you as a kid, you as a teenager. Were you were you kicking the ball around? Were you building Legos? Were you playing music, sports, lemonade stand? What were you doing as a kid?
I was selling I was selling seeds. That's my parents one time. I wanted to sell something. I think I was in second grade. And we I can't when you're the youngest of five kids, you live out in a farm, even though we didn't farm it, we didn't have a lot of extra money. And my mom got me a seed kit that we could get from school where we get 50 packets of seeds. And I come home like a half an hour early, and she goes, "Well, did you give up already?" And I said, "No, I sold them already." I was already out. So it's like, so then the next time we got like two kits, and I went out, and you got to understand, my next door neighbor, the closest neighbor, was like a quarter of a mile away. So I mean, I'm sitting here walking from house to house, knocking on doors, telling people what I'm doing. And then it wasn't long after that, we had access to an old apple orchard that wasn't being actually picked. And my brothers and some of my brothers and their friends would go and pick the apples, and they would put me on the roadside right next to the country club. We had a country club right next to us that my dad had managed at one point, and we would put bushels of apples, wine sap apples. I even remember which kind they were, and we were selling them for like $7 a bushel. And when people saw $7 a bushel, even back then, it was pretty young, pretty long time ago. I'd be selling out of those apples, and I guess it gave me a little bit of an entrepreneurial spirit, and so I guess that's part of your growing up, part of how you do. And then I actually have a music background as well. I did quite a bit of music, mostly as a vocalist. Did some singing. Thought that would might
Prove
be my
it.
career.
Prove it.
Well, what do you want me to sing? I have to sing a gospel song because that's mostly what I know. Um,
We should have done
you
the
know,
national anthem before we started.
oh, say, can you see?
There you
No,
go.
I only sang that once. My track team buddies and I, we had some other good vocalists, and we actually went around and sang in college. And we did the national anthem in four parts, really strong harmonies, and
Love
and
it.
uh, so we did that kind of stuff. So kind of a musical background. I was in the music industry for a bit, mostly on the marketing side. Did a little backup singing for some folks a little bit, but not, I didn't want to travel that much back then. I had five kids at the time, and I didn't want to, being away for weeks at a time on the road, even if it's a Christian group or a ministry type thing. It was just like, that's a little too much. But so kind of middle brain creative, but business guy too, so I'm stuck in the middle. I call myself middle brained.
Isn't that a song? Stuck in the middle with
Stuck in the
you.
middle with you. Yeah. Stuck in
Yeah.
the middle with you.
Exactly. Your five kids, how
Seven
old?
now, but
Oh, so yeah, how old and Yeah.
So 34 is my oldest, which is really kind of simply amazing. And my youngest is in college, and he's competing as well. I got two competing in college, one at Buffalo University, one at a small college in Tennessee. And my oldest son, he already competed, and he is coaching now at the highest level. He coaches pro and highest level collegiate
Nice.
athletes at Northern Arizona University. So my dad ran world class. I kind of ran high collegiate. My son ran high collegiate, and now coaches high collegiate, and two of my kids were top runners in New York State. Right on up there with the topsman runners. So it's kind of fun to see all that trickle down, I guess.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I love watching seeing the threads of things people did as little kids, and as it went into different experiences they had, and then if they went to college or if they didn't, what were these experiences and how there always seems to be a thread. And I think I say the lemonade stand it has become the symbol of entrepreneurialism, if you will, for entrepreneurship
Right.
for people. And how does and then you went to University of Georgia, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
I was interested to know what was the CEO of Space International, um, that's on your LinkedIn. It is 2013. It says CEO
Oh, CEO space.
International.
Uh, oh, not what is it?
It
CEO of
says
what?
CEO Space International. You got entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial studies.
So that was a group that I joined where we went and did like a 2-week class, CEO space. That was like a
Uh,
big mastermind that we got involved with. I'm still connected with several people from that. So that was what that was, and um, I don't even think about that much. But every once in a while, I can go to those meetings. I just haven't. I've been a part of more of the Pantheon with Josh Tapp, networking with him. He's been a top podcaster. I'm actually going to a meeting with him and some other guys in next week in Orlando. But that
oh,
this might be not be out, so it might be already passed by the time this comes out. This podcast.
oh, we'll rewind or something. I don't know.
Rewind, yeah.
But tell in general, how do you think your experiences we just talked about, through college and everything, um, impacted your thought process? I'm pretty well a believer of things happen for a reason, and it's probably because sometimes something comes up and it hits us, triggers us, touches us, whatnot. Um,
Yeah.
how did all those experiences lead you to getting to this point?
Yeah, every little experience kind of builds on itself. There's no doubt. Even my transfer to Georgia, you asked for stories I don't normally tell. And I was at a small college, an NAIA school. I'd done very well. Actually, I survived meningitis my sophomore year.
Wow.
Almost killed me. And I still came back and competed and wound up earning wound up, my dad made a little bit more money than he normally did. He was a traveling salesman, and I didn't get the financial aid to get back into school because this was a non-scholarship school I was at. And even though it wasn't a lot of money back then, it was more money than I could afford.
Right.
And so I was devastated because I wasn't able to continue to compete and go to school, and was going to have to at least lay out a semester. And when I say devastated, I was on my knees begging, praying for God to do a work. And I was broken. There's a couple of times in your life where you're just broken. Well, that was one of those times.
Right.
Couldn't compete with my teammates, and I'd worked so hard, and I just didn't have the money to get in to school. And so here I'm broken, I'm praying. And during that time, the University of Georgia coach had me on his radar because he had seen me run at IU, and he knew about me through my brother and some other connections. And there was a runner that was ahead of me on the scholarship ranks that couldn't get into school. And I get a call while I'm in the office of the president of the school, the AD of the school. The coach of the University of Georgia gets wired, finds me there, because there's no cell phone back then, type
Right.
thing. And they found out that I was, talking with the president because they were trying to figure out how to get me back into school for the next semester. And I get this call from the University of Georgia with this real Southern accent you can hardly understand. If you ever heard like a low Southern accent and you're not used to hearing the Southern accents, like they're talking in another language. And Jeff Gaither was the coach, my coach, and he was the one recruiting me. And he says, Doug, we'd really like you to consider coming to Georgia. You got a full ride. And so I went from a 30 minutes earlier having the devastating news of not being able to compete, not being able to get to school, to having an offer, everything paid for. And it's a wonderful reminder to me that God worked things out and things were meant to be. And so I got the best experience of a small school. Then all of a sudden, it's not small schools that you're looking at. It's you're competing against Penn State and Florida and Kentucky and and all those kind of things. And I remember the first race that I won. It was weird because it was 1,000 meters indoors at Florida, and you had to run a race the day before to even get into the race. So you'd already run a prelim the day before, and then there was a final. And I was typically a front runner. I'm a fairly tall guy. I'm 6'2" plus and long stride. So I didn't like getting messed up, especially on an indoor track. And so I would just take the lead if I could. I would typically just take the lead. And I was in the lead. I was in the lead, and it's a 5-lap race on a 200-meter track. I was in the lead, and I was saying, I'm going to kick, I'm going to kick. As soon as somebody comes up to, I can feel somebody. And all of a sudden we got to the finish line. And I was like, I never kicked because nobody came up to me. It was just and I was probably self-consciously picking up, but I
Right.
felt like I never kicked. And then all of a sudden I was like, okay, maybe I do belong here. It was like one of those eye-opening things. So it was a good experience.
Sports in
So you
itself.
got two stories I don't normally tell already.
I'm blessed. I I love sports stories, and we've talked about this a little bit. I love sports. I mean, there's so much importance and value sports gives, especially if you have good coaches to everything in life. Like you're talking about with these stories about, belonging on a team is an incredible experience, way more
Absolutely.
exciting than winning something alone, with all due respect to tennis or whatever, but winning something on your own. The bond you have, you hear it when you watch pro teams and they say, even if they get traded at the end of the year or something happens to go to another team, but that bond will always be there for that team all the time and those people. And you just learn so much. And I just see that it's a stream through your whole background, right? And
Yeah.
and and also then meeting Dave.
Yeah, when you think about things that had to be meant to be, Dave Clark is definitely one of those.
Now,
And
just to clarify to everybody, this isn't the Dave Clark Five,
no, but it makes you glad all over if you're old enough to remember.
right?
You can sing again, glad all over. People
Right
don't know
all
that
over.
song. I didn't know the Dave Clark Five, but I knew that song when I started researching him after.
Right.
When you Google Dave Clark, you got to put Dave Clark crutches or polio or
Oh, it's
baseball
terrible.
because Dave Clark Five like owns Dave Clark in YouTube.
Yeah, but I think Dave Clark, yours has, with all due respect to Dave Clark Five, made a bigger impact. So tell us
Yeah, it's
tell us
amazing.
about how that encounter happened and take us to the story about how it evolved.
Yeah, so in 2000, right at 2000, I was moving to with my family to Corning, New York, from Atlanta to partner with my brothers at Merrill Lynch. So it was really the first time I was going to get a real job, so to speak. I was always entrepreneur before that, and I was partnering with my brother in this little town of Corning, New York, and I was studying my Series 7 at the time. First time I had to study since Georgia. I was like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. So I'm going to coffee shops. I got a little bit of ADHD. It's not technically
Don't we all?
diagnosed, but I think we all do. And I can't go to a library. It's too quiet. I'll go crazy. And so I'm going to coffee shops with a little bit of noise. And there was a coffee shop I was studying in Atlanta, in the Atlanta area, in Kennesaw, Georgia, and there's still papers back there, still newspapers back when this was happening in 2000. And I opened up a newspaper during a break, and I read an article about a guy playing professional baseball on crutches. And he had won the Heroes of Sports Award. That was at Atlanta at the World Congress Center. His big $17,000 check presented to Dave. And here I'm reading this article about this guy, and I'm like, I grew up in the sports world. I mean, I met people like Jesse Owens and Bruce Jenner, and when I was a kid, that was not abnormal for me. And all of a sudden, I'm reading about this guy who played professional baseball on crutches. Doesn't make sense. And what really didn't make sense is that he lived in Corning, New York, where I was moving my family.
Well,
And Corning's only about 10,000 people big. So I get back to the office because I was doing the back and forth. I do like a week at home, week back, kind of back and forth until I was able to get my place and bring my family up. And I asked my brother Kurt, who had been in the Corning area longer, and I said, "Do you know this Dave Clark guy who played baseball on crutches?" He goes, "Yeah, I know Dave." And I'm like, What do you mean you know Dave? It's like, who is this guy? How do I not know him? But the reason it was probably more intriguing to me is that my fifth child, my second son, was born with neither arm developed. He's virtually got no arms. He's got a little bit of left arm with a couple of fingers that function. And and so here I have a special needs child, physically limited. I'm reading this article about this guy who played professional baseball on crutches, and as it would be, Dave had just finished his coaching career. He'd played for 17 years, owned a team, wound up playing in the Swedish major leagues, again, all on crutches, then wound up coaching in the Swedish major leagues, coaching in the Olympics, coaching for Atlanta Braves, all these things. So this is why he got the Heroes of Sports Award. And I'm sitting here asking my brother about all this, and Dave had moved back more permanently to Corning the same year that I did in 2000. And he was part-time coaching. He was full-time coaching. He was a full-time scout for the, I think, San Diego Padres when I officially met him. And he was coaching here for a small local pro team as a part-time coach, part-time pitching coach. So he was at one of the games. I took my family to the little minor league game. And after the game, I reached myself with my son in my arms around the dugout, and I asked him if he would meet. And of course, he saw my son, and he's pretty attuned to special needs type stuff, being in his situation. He said, sure. He knew my brother. We exchanged phone numbers, and we had what we call the infamous breakfast meeting at a breakfast place that just closed down after all these years. And we had a breakfast meeting there. And the one thing that I tell people I remember about that particular breakfast meeting is that Dave told me nobody had asked him questions like I was asking him. And the reason being is I was asking him, what did your parents do? What was it like in school? All things like that, where most people are asking him, what did you pitch? How did you do this? Where'd you play for? Those. I got to that later,
Right.
but this meeting was not about that. It was, how did you become so freaking successful when you basically can't walk without crutches and braces? You got, all these things. He's only 5'2". It just doesn't make sense. And then that started a friendship that obviously has continued. I just spent 3 weeks with the man down in Florida, and we spoke in Birmingham, Alabama, and so it was just a really intriguing time. And the things that he told me that day about his parents probably was the most meaningful,
Hmm.
because he told me his parents never held him back, even though it didn't make sense what he was trying to accomplish and how he was so determined. But he said his parents didn't ever show their doubt to him. Did they doubt? Of course. And we've got great stories to tell about that, but they never showed it. And again, then became more stories. And then he told me he played ice hockey in college. And I'm like, what do you mean you played ice hockey in college? You can't even stand up right now. And, he couldn't skate. He was a goalie. He was a goalie who couldn't skate. And since you're a hockey guy, you got your hockey. He's actually called games all the way to the NHL level. He's been in the ECHL as a color guy. He was with Elmira College calling their games. He loves hockey more than baseball, but hockey was more always a fun thing, where baseball became a business. So you can't compare the two.
It's fascinating again to me that how great on his parents, because you shoot for the moon, and if you don't end up there but you end up a little below it, it's still great. If you don't shoot for the moon, you'll end up below even that, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Well, the touching story that really affects me about Dave is that when he was 15, 16, he started dreaming about playing professional baseball. But he was getting people out in Corning, New York. Corning's 10,000 people big. So it's like, okay, my knuckleball's working on these people. Is it going to work at the next
And
level?
this is at
He
5'2",
5'2".
like a Freddie Patek type of guy. If
Well,
you
his legs didn't grow because of the polio. They didn't form very well. One leg's
all
a
of them,
little strong. Yeah,
all of them.
all upper body. But he could still only throw. I say only. He registered about 79 miles an hour as his fastball, but all upper body. And swinging with his crutches, throwing with his crutches. It's pretty amazing to see how he did all that stuff. But he had to do it differently, so he developed a knuckleball.
Right.
Every arm angle, he'd throw up against the garage. He'd throw to his dad. All sorts of funny
And
stories
all
like
with the
that. But
foundation of my parents believe in me.
well, let me tell the story, because
Hmm.
what happened is, no, probably more that he believed in himself and his parents didn't get in the way.
Okay. Well,
Okay.
hmm.
And he worked for his goal without any guarantee of getting a shot.
Sure.
And so when he got his shot, he was ready. And when the shot happened, he literally hand wrote every Major League Baseball at the time asking for a tryout. Hand wrote a letter. You can imagine these GMs opening up a letter. Hey, I'm 5'2" and I'm on crutches, but can you give me a tryout? You know, it's absurd from a perspective.
Yeah.
He got 3 responses and he got 1 tryout with the Pittsburgh Pirates from Art Gaines, who was their lead scout at the time. He had to go all the way out to Missouri, drive out to Missouri for this make believe shot from a perspective. Made the team, parlayed it to playing for 17 years, played in the Swedish major leagues, played with the Phillies organization, played with the famous Indianapolis Clowns, just all sorts of things that he did. Played in the Yankees organization, bought a team during that time. He actually bought the Indianapolis Clowns. There's a whole story about that. If you're not familiar with them, that was Hank Aaron's first professional baseball team.
Wow.
And it's one of the original
Wow.
Negro League
Yeah.
teams. Okay, and so 1988 comes, his 17-year career, and his mother, he's at his parents' house watching football in the fall, and he had just decided to put it all away and retire. Didn't know what he's going to do next. His mother comes up to him and she's got a letter in her hand, an old-fashioned letter. She says, Dave, I want you to read this. It was postmarked like 1972. So he's like, this is 1988. So he's like, okay, what is this? It was addressed to the neighbor's house. Because what it was the return response of his mother asking Art Gaines, the owner of this minor league team, but the lead scout for the Pittsburgh Pirates, asking him to let her son down easy because she knew how much it meant to him. And this was the response letter.
Wow.
And she actually had it sent to the neighbors just in case Dave might be home and he'd get the mail. So she's giving him this letter many, many years later, hands it to him, asks him to read it. And basically, with tears in her eyes, she said, Dave, how could I have ever doubted you?
Hmm.
And the point that we share with that story is me as a father with a child with limitations, Dave as the kid growing up with limitations, is that his parents never showed the doubt.
I got
And so
goosebumps. I got goosebumps. You just telling it.
yeah, and it's more so when Dave tells it because he almost can't. I mean, once in a while he gets through that story without tearing up and getting emotional, but
Sure.
it's not often. His mother's been, passed away with cancer back in the 90s, and his father, he's got father stories too, of course. And that story means so much to me to share that with families and caregivers and special needs teachers, because obviously when a kid with Down syndrome says he wants to make the pros or he wants to sing like Mick Jagger or whatever the case is, I'm aging myself, or sing like Dave Clark 5 or whatever. You just don't say, oh, no, you can't do that. Because that's our response. You want to protect them from that.
Yeah.
Dave's parents did not do that. And yes, they doubted.
Sure.
They were concerned he was going to get crushed. They knew. I mean, if you know Dave's personality, I thought I was competitive. If I would have been as competitive as he was, I would have made the Olympics. No doubt in my mind, because that kind of spirit, it goes way, way beyond just being competitive. He had to be. He had to do things. He worked out 6 days a week. He ran 5 miles a day on his crutches. He did 4 hours of work, on a stationary bike. All his push-ups, sit-ups. If it was winter outside, he would run 5 miles around his pool table in his parents' basement. He had it measured out of what it would take to run 5 miles in his basement.
He's like Rocky.
No, yeah, we've got all. Well, we're hoping to have that movie deal, but it hasn't happened yet. But we'll see. We're still working on scripts and all those kind of things. And COVID put a big hit on that one. But it is. It's except there's one big difference between Rocky and Dave Clark. Dave Clark's is true.
Right.
It's real,
Yeah.
and he did it when people didn't do these kind of things. He did it when people couldn't do these kind of things. So to say he's an inspiration to a father like me, who has a child with limitations, And even today, he's an inspiration because it's not easy for him anymore.
I'm
You know,
sure. I mean, you've got to do everything way better, way everything than anybody else, and which is part of the challenge you want to step up to, but it's hard.
yeah, it's definitely hard. And I don't know how much longer I'm going to have him. I hope to have him for 15, 20 years. That's probably not likely. And fortunately, we have another Dave, but you can have him on the show too. So we've got and now we know all sorts of people. Just in my book, pulling each other along, we've got so many people that have these great stories as well.
So describe now, what Disability Dream and Do, or D3 Day, if you
Yeah,
will,
the same.
is
Yeah,
all about.
yeah. So what formed with Disability Dream and Do is, because of Dave's limitation and his big heart, he's been doing well. It started as impromptu sports camps for people with disabilities. So kind of flash through this crazy story because it's almost unbelievable already if you're listening and if you're still listening. But Dave played for the Indianapolis Clowns, actually had one of his best years and actually got scouted by the famous Bill Veeck. Was looking to pull Dave up
Good.
for the Chicago Cubs because Dave had a great season in 1975. He kind of didn't do as well in 1976, and that precluded him from getting that big shot. Um, but years later, Dave had started a baseball camp in Ocala, a pro baseball camp that was doing very, very well. And he and his partners decided they wanted to start their own team. And at the same time, the owner of the Indianapolis Clowns, George Long, um, called Dave saying he wanted to sell the team. And Dave wound up in 1983 purchasing the Indianapolis Clowns. And you don't think anything of it, but it was a traveling team. It had Hank Aaron, Satchel Paige, all these greats, huge, huge, rich history, and they tried to keep that in as much as possible. It was an integrated team at this point, so it was black players, white players. He was just trying to get the best players on the field. It was low end pro ball. They didn't have a home field. They were always away. They traveled all over the country playing these games. Whether it be at Doubleday Field. We got videos from Doubleday Field up in Buffalo. They play every year in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. He's got great stories of that. And so they played all over, and so he played for that team and pitched for that team in '75, but bought the team in '83. And because he wanted to still be on the field, even though he had blown out his elbow, he blew out his elbow playing in the Swedish major leagues. So he couldn't pitch anymore. So he developed himself into a first baseman and played 5 more years.
Well,
So that's when you say, and he would not have put himself on first base if he couldn't handle it because he wants to win too much. If he was going to be a hindrance for that team, and I know his players, that I never got to see him play other than video. I know the players well, some of them very well, and they said Dave could pick it better than anybody. So he held his own on first base. He even had to hit during those days. But oftentimes, it like Babe Ruth did at the end of his career, they would have a designated runner for him. But not every team. Sometimes they still made him run the bases, depending on the situation. So anyway,
they're
so
trying
he
to
owned
do
that.
tire, they're trying to tire him out.
Well, just they saying he had to do it. So if a team said he had to do it, then they didn't give him the pinch runner. But most teams did. And because there was a precedence of that where Babe Ruth had done that in major leagues. I don't know if you know that. And
Hmm.
later in his career, they'd have a runner there, set at a certain spot, he'd hit the ball, and somebody else would run for him.
He
So
actually
that
ran from not just
from
after
home,
he got
yeah,
first
yeah,
base,
no,
he
from home
ran.
plate, yeah, they've ran
Oh
from
my
home plate,
God.
yeah.
I thought you meant they ran after he got to first or something.
No, no, they actually ran from home plate, yeah. So
That's crazy.
yeah, so I mean, when he played in '75 and those kind of things, if he did hit, but there was the DH saved him. But the DH, because he would clog up the base runners. I mean, he was 11 seconds to first base, so obviously he was not a speedster. Um, and so anyway, so just the little things and people say I know Dave's story better than he does at this point. But every time we travel, I get a new story. So
So it's
yeah, so
clear.
the camps
Yeah.
started. He was actually in Indianapolis, and he knocked on a group home door. And this group home, he said, "Hey, anybody want tickets for the game tonight?" This is when he owned the Indianapolis Clowns. And they'd say, "Yeah, yeah, we'd love tickets." It's a bunch of folks that are special needs or need help, and it's a group home. And they'd come, and then he said, "Well, would anybody like to do a little baseball practice before the game?" Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. So all of a sudden, he's got 10, 15, 20 people from the group home, and he gets 3 or 4 of his players, and they're playing pickle, or they're hitting, they're doing drills with them and whatever, and they're just having the time of their life, and then they get to go to the game. Well, the next year, it's like, everybody's lining up to do these things, to do the camp every time we would come and do one of these impromptu camps. And so that was kind of the predecessor of what we do today. And so, but now what we do is it's a little more. I say it's organized chaos because it's the way to structure. When you get 80 to 90 to even 100 people with disabilities on the field at the same time, it can feel like organized chaos. Was what we call it. But so we partner with mostly professional baseball teams,
Hmm.
Minnesota Twins, Phillies this year, the Giants organization, to the Yankees organization, and we've done others as well. And so we give kids and young adults, all ages, all disabilities, an opportunity to get on the field. We set up stations, so we don't try to play a game because there's too much standing around if you do that. And
Right.
so we set up stations, 5 stations typically, a pitching station, a t-ball station, a target station, which is one of the favorites. That basically becomes dodgeball where the kids are getting throwing balls at the players. We have a fielding station and whatever else my other station is. And so they do these stations. They get about 8 to 12 minutes at every station. But the pro players are the ones manning the stations. And so within 5 or 10 minutes of our camp, it's all soft equipment, balls are flying everywhere, those kind of things. But by 5 or 10 minutes into the camp, it's the best way I can describe it. It was described in a blog years ago when we did a camp with the Milwaukee Brewers, their AAA Nashville team. And a mother that came to our camp wrote a blog, and I didn't find this out until months later, just doing some, searching yourself, and then I was, that's about us. And so I'm reading this blog, and first half of the blog was her sharing about her angst about finding out about this camp and wanting to take her daughter, who's in a wheelchair, because her daughter always went to her brother's games but never got to do anything herself. So the mother said she guilted herself into taking her daughter to this unknown disability dream and do camp she didn't know anything about. It seemed too real, because they get free t-shirts, they get free hats, we feed them, we give them tickets, and they don't pay a dime. So she was like, what's the catch? So she's literally saying, what's the catch? And then she said in the middle of her blog, she goes, and then a team of young men came out on the field and created a morning of magic for our children. And I'm like, I can't say it better than that, because I've done enough of these. I'm just setting it up. Dave's just setting it up. We just set it up. And then really what I do is I just walk around with a microphone in my hand telling people when to rotate.
Hmm.
And the magic is just happening everywhere. And the reason I know this is because usually that night I'll get sometimes, well, at that Nashville event, we had a photographer at every camp. I think I got 10,000 photos for one event. They got a little trigger happy with digital cameras. So I'll have thousands of photos, and I kind of just do have my little quick thing, and that's when I get to experience the camp, because now I'm seeing every expression, every fun thing, every hand raised, whatever, all the stuff, and I'm getting to literally experience the camp that night when I go through and edit and clip, and then I try to print out pictures for the next day, and hopefully my daughter's there to help me or somebody else, but usually it was me, and still is me sometimes, and then I get to print out 400 or 500 photos, and I get to see all these photos and every child's expression and the players' expressions and the volunteers' expressions, and that's how I experience the camp. And we give these days for free for families. I've raised all the money for it. Dave, of course, Davis helped as well, and we've
It's
never charged.
you know, it's first of all, congratulations because it's spectacular. There's a quote that is sort of related. It's Maya Angelou said, most people will forget what you've said, most people forget what you've done, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And I don't care if it's for 1 minute or an hour or whatnot, that feeling of accomplishment, that feeling of that excitement that we've felt in sports ourselves and whatnot is life-changing.
Yep. Yeah,
So,
all I have to do is go through my phone, which I'm recording on right now because my computer got wet, as we talked about. but the things that happen to us. And but I can go through my phone and I can just I have pictures on there and I have videos on there. I can go to my Facebook pages and just I have albums of photos from camps that go now pretty far back, and I can just pull up a video of a little boy named Christian who was at our camp in Rochester a couple years ago, and he's in his walker and he's a little boy, he's cute as can be. And Dave Stevens, my other Dave, who was born with no legs and three-sport athlete, played professional baseball at St. Paul Saints, and he's a seven-time Emmy Award winner with ESPN. So he's a big part of our camps now too. And he's with this little boy named Christian who's in this walker, and Dave's on the ground because that's how tall he is. He doesn't have any legs, and he walks on his hands, and he's having a catch, and this little boy catches a ball for the first time in his life. You would have thought he won the World Series. And we're talking about just cheers. Like, I can't even bring the emotion to it unless I was a professional actor. I mean, he brings energy to that video because he caught a ball.
Yeah. I,
And
mm,
that just says it all,
it,
and
it does. And it should tell us cherish the moments, don't take things for granted, all the like cliches you're thinking about. Um, because that feeling's amazing, and that feeling will last a lifetime for that person.
and his mom and parents that were there, and to us, I mean, because it's going to last a lifetime to us because we were able to capture that.
Hmm.
We can't capture everything, but we've captured that. We have a video of Jack, who's is older now, and this was probably pre-COVID when we got this picture. And, because sometimes they're doing stuff and you don't get the video, because you don't have videos everywhere. But this one got caught. At the end of our camps, we do what's called the high five game. Lots of energy goes into this high five game, but it's always at the end. We set up like wiffle ball sized fields with throw bases, and they usually get a chance to hit it over the fence. So we set it up so that if they do connect, they can get it over the fence.
Hmm.
And this young man named Jack, who's been to our camps, and he's got some severe intellectual challenges or whatever, and he connects with the ball and hits his baby over the fence. And they only get one shot in the high five game, so it's like you got a pro pitcher throwing the ball at you. He connects. He is jumping up and down like he just hit the grand slam of the World Series, and we caught that on video, and it's super great. And he runs around the bases because what happens in the high five games? They hit the ball. If the ball goes 2 inches, we're cheering for him and we're getting him running around the bases. We only have so much time. The lunch is about ready to go and things, and if they hit the ball, they'll run around the bases. Everybody's cheering for them, and they get to go give high fives as they run around the bases to these young pro athletes, and
Hmm.
they come around and hit home base. And sometimes you can say, "No, you gotta hit home base. You gotta hit home base," because they're just worried about the high fives, and then they're running to their parents or whatever. But
What's great too
it's
is the pros just get the feeling as much as anybody too, because it brings them back to being a kid, and it just brings them to, man, I'm really making a difference here. And I've heard it, from other pros I've worked with, and you said before, or somebody said to me today, what you learned from the kids. Yeah, we learned to cherish the moments like that from them.
yeah. Yeah, and we have stories about that, and these guys get to meet Dave pregame, both my Daves, and so they get to hear their stories, which they're like, they're
Inspirational. Hey, look, you
yeah,
can do it too. Right?
they're flipped out about it, and they never forget Dave. So, if they see him at a spring training game, these guys will come up to him and come up to us because they remember us. They'll remember us together. They won't remember me, but they'll always remember Dave. And I
They
have one.
probably remember you too.
In some cases, they do as well, but usually by association, they see us together. They remember. And so one of the stories, a guy named Trey Vavra, and actually his brother Tana Vavra had played the year before for the Twins A team, and then Trey, his brother, played the next year. So I'd gotten to know each other because Tanner Vavra was playing minor league baseball, and he was missing. He can't see out of one eye because his dad got him with a fish hook when he was a kid. Okay. So here he's playing pretty high level baseball, playing infield, hitting and everything with one eye, so we obviously connected with Tanner, and we have a cool story with Tanner. But the next year his brother Trey was playing. And one of the things that's really cool is after our event, we feed everybody. So we cater to 150, 200 people, whoever's still staying around, volunteers, everybody eats, and Sam's Club pizza and Jersey Mike sandwiches, whatever I can try to grab, and whatever I can't grab, I have to buy. And so we have this big catered meal, and we always encourage the families if they can, or the players to, if they can, to sit and meet some of the families afterward.
Hmm.
And so Trey got talking to this one young lady and her adopted mother. Her name is Danielle. She's come to several of our camps, pretty severely intellectually challenged, and he got to hear her story and meet this family. And her story, she was beaten as a child, just horrifically. And so the whole experience with Trey being at our camp, and he was one of the good campers, doing everything he could, putting 100% energy into the camp, just quality young man. And the next day, I happened to catch him because what happens is the next day we give everybody tickets to come back to the game. But because I'd gotten to know the Vavras, because of his brother Tanner and Trey, and I still text these guys, so these are long relationships that
Sure.
build. And so Trey told me, he said, Doug, after the camp, I went into the locker room and I could not stop crying for 30 minutes.
I knew you were going to say that. Right.
He just said, I just couldn't stop, and they never forget. And actually, in some of our promos, we use the line, the players get more out of it than the participants themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not unusual, but spectacular. No, I mean, congrats on the great work you do. It's the most important work in the world, really.
Yeah.
It's giving people even one time an amazing feeling, and then one time a feeling of I'm valuable, I'm good, I'm great, a feeling
Right.
of belonging to something. People believe me, they love me. It's all real stuff. It's all real
Yeah.
stuff,
And then I get to present the Daves as my two Daves, Dave Clark, Dave Stevens, as guys that didn't let their limitations hold them back.
right.
And then in my Pulling Each Other Along book, I've got kids with limitations that had Down syndrome. I don't know if you know the story of Chris Nickick. Chris is a young man with Down syndrome in Florida, went from couch potato to the only Iron Man with Down syndrome
Hmm.
because his dad put him on a program of getting 1% better. And so it's inspirations like that. It's not just there's other stories. I can go on and on and on and on
No,
with
I
all these
know.
stories.
I remember I told you we're not doing a feature film here.
Right, right. No, so it's just getting the Daves, because those are my two main, relationships to these camps, and getting their stories, even if it's so briefly, to these parents, and letting these parents know, don't doubt your children, just like the story we said. Don't hold them back. Yeah, they might get their skin, they might get a skin chin and a bruised elbow or whatever.
And you know what? They'll
Um,
love that.
yeah,
If they get a bruised elbow or something, you feel that too. And it might hurt, but it doesn't hurt.
right.
Because
It
it's
hurts
real.
when you don't get to compete and you don't get to play, and
Right.
that's what hurts more than a skin chin or a bruised elbow. And so all of those things combined, it's obviously not just about sports.
No,
Um,
sports
it's
is the tool, and the
it's
rest
just it's
is
just a
that.
means.
So I got a last question on this, or as they say in LA, we got to leave them wanting more, so you can do a sequel type of thing, as we said. But with everything, that in this whole story that we've told of stories, um, and a pandemic, and we're in 2005, and the world's in this and that, and everything's going on. What are you most grateful for, and what are you most hopeful for?
In the last year, I'm grateful that God steered us and provided for us. Right now, that's what I'm the most grateful, that He had to really show us in some ways that I would have never, never, ever, 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 ever expected, to pull us out, to make us realize that He's real. And, that's what I'm the most grateful for right now,
And hopeful?
and hopeful. Yeah, there's some real hope on the horizon, but if somebody's hearing this and they want to partner with us, go to d3day.com, find Doug Cornfield on LinkedIn, because I'm super easy to find on LinkedIn. I mean, you can give them my cell phone number. I don't care. And I get enough spam calls anyway. So if it's a real call, it's kind of refreshing. So Mark, we're looking for partners. We're looking for, right now, getting teams to work with us. That's not the issue. Getting it funded is the biggest issue. It's so many things. And we have some cool business stuff that we're working on. Getting Dave and I to speak, we're worth it. Pat myself on the back. It's because of Dave, not because of me. But we do typically speak together.
Hmm.
because we bounce off each other. It's like 90% him, 10% me. But you get some of these same stories. Just have your Kleenexes ready and be ready to be motivated when you get
Which
to.
is which is what you told me at the beginning. You wanted to get your time in this time. Dave couldn't.
That's great. Well, it's actually the day we're recording this is Dave's wife's birthday, and it's like we did.
Ah.
And his wife's a wee bit younger than him. He had to lie about his age when he was coaching in the major leagues of Sweden. Um, she's well, they have a 15-year-old and Dave's 72. So they're just
Well, everything's obviously still working.
yeah. Well,
Um,
that's what he used to say in one of his keynotes. He did his only TED talk, and I think his son was like 2 or 3 at the time, and he shows a picture and he goes, "Well, something's still working, thank God."
I don't want to keep going on that. I'll start saying the wrong stuff.
Yeah, we'll be good. We'll be good.
Hey, thanks for sharing all that and thanks for what you do. It's inspiring just listening to it. I haven't been in sports. I can feel the emotion and the impact that you're making. And it's so important because people will hear this, people will see it, someone else will say, I mean, maybe I can do it too, and go do stuff. So yeah, you're appreciated, you're valued. We love you, and thanks for being on the series.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me, and just appreciate the opportunity to get to know you a little bit better, and get the word out of Disability Dream and Do as we're coming out of this COVID funk and getting going again in a strong way.
Done, man. Thanks.